Can you imagine a truck so strange it looked more like a military design than something meant for the road? In the height of the Soviet era, when giants like KamAZ, KamAZ, and ZIL ruled the scene, a monster appeared, the Dutra DR-50D, a Hungarian beast as unusual as it was dangerous. Its appearance was unsettling, its handling almost suicidal. But why did it become such a feared rarity among drivers? Today, we're going to dig up the story of the strangest and most dangerous truck to ever roll through the USSR. Although the Dutra DR-50D looks like a miniature version of the bewildering, it's not really a truck in the strict sense. It's more of a hauling tractor, which makes sense given it was designed and produced at the Budapest tractor plant, Vöröscsillag. This curious machine was often called a dumper. And what's a dumper? Very simple. It's a type of dump truck designed to work in tight spaces. The main characteristics of these vehicles were their short wheelbase, compact size, and simple structure. In fact, the name Dutra comes from combining the words dumper and tractor. This model didn't have a chassis in the traditional sense. Its construction resembled a stripped-down backbone, an engine with gearbox, a driving rear axle, and an independent front suspension with a transverse leaf spring. That was its entire frame. On top of this base sat a 3.5 cubic meter hopper, the driver's seat, controls, fenders with hood, and the fuel tank. For working in confined areas, the dumper was quite handy. Its wheelbase of 2,375 mm allowed it to turn almost on its own axis, with a turning radius of no more than 5.6 meters. Its top speed was modest, 34 km/h, but for a tractor, which is what it really was, that was perfectly acceptable. This vehicle consumed 30 liters of diesel per 100 kilometers. Despite its empty weight of 5.4 tons, it could haul up to 6 tons of load. Power came from a 4-cylinder D413 diesel engine with 60 horsepower, borrowed from the Hungarian Suicidal truck. It was paired with a 4-speed gearbox with a range multiplier and a rear axle with a reversible reduction gear, which also allowed for 4 reverse gears. All the brakes were drum brakes with hydraulic actuation. Here's a curious detail. The steering column had 2 steering wheels, and the pedals were also duplicated. Thanks to this setup, it wasn't necessary to turn the vehicle around to change direction. The driver just had to rotate his seat 180 degrees around the steering column and continue driving. But the strangest thing about the dumper was its self-dumping bed. It had no hydraulic cylinders to lift it. Instead, it was mounted on the frame with special runners and held by a latch. To unload it, the driver would pull a cable from a safe distance to release the latch, and the bed would tip under its own weight, thanks to the load being concentrated at the rear. The method was simple, but quite dangerous. Upon reaching the dumping point, the driver had to move about 5 meters away from the machine and pull the cable to release the latch. The hopper would tip, then snap back into place, pushed by 2 springs that locked it automatically. Often, this unloading was accompanied by a sudden lift of the front axle, and sometimes the vehicle could tip over backward or sideways. There were even cases where the dumper shot back after dumping its load and fell straight into the excavation pit. Drivers were supposed to stay clear of the vehicle during unloading, and it was mandatory to leave the cab. But many ignored these warnings, which sadly led to several accidents. Safety was critical, and perhaps that's why Soviet drivers wanted nothing to do with this strange machine. On top of its peculiar dumping system, the Dutra DR-50D had very heavy steering, since the front axle carried a lot of weight and lacked power steering. For all these reasons, the dumper never gained popularity in the USSR. Only about 6,000 units were imported. Not even the later addition of a closed metal cab and a hydraulic lift system for the hopper managed to change its fate. An interesting fact often overlooked about the Dutra DR-50D is that beyond its obvious dangers, it was actually a pragmatic response to very specific needs in the industrial contexts of socialist bloc countries. It was designed to operate in extremely tight environments: underground mines, treatment plants, foundries, coal power stations, and other industrial zones where spaces were so narrow that a traditional truck simply couldn't move. In those places, the Raba D50 offered a compact and mechanically simple solution for internal transport of heavy materials. What's fascinating is that this vehicle embodied a design philosophy focused purely on function, even at the cost of safety. Its frameless structure, its dual driving system that eliminated the need to turn the vehicle around, and its dump bed without hydraulic cylinders were all attempts to reduce components, cut costs, and simplify maintenance. In fact, many of these machines were repaired in the field by workers with no formal technical training, using improvised spare parts and basic tools. The dumping system itself, although today we would call it reckless, was a way to avoid expensive hydraulic systems that at the time were difficult to service or repair in remote areas. There are reports of workers who operated the Raba D50 with true mastery, almost as if it were an extension of their own body. They knew exactly where to position themselves, when to pull the cable to release the bed, and how to maneuver it in spaces where no other machine could fit. In countries like Hungary or Czechoslovakia, specialized operators were even trained for these dumpers, and some units were modified by hand with iron reinforcements or even homemade hydraulic dumping systems. All of this speaks of an era of battlefield engineering, of creativity born from scarcity, where efficiency was prioritized over comfort and safety. Today, technological evolution in trucks has completely transformed the approach. Safety, which was once barely an afterthought, is now one of the central pillars of design. Since the 1990s, with the advance of European and American safety regulations, cabs have been equipped with crumple zones, rollover protection structures, and internal restraint systems. Modern trucks now feature electronic stability control, ESP, collision warning systems, autonomous emergency braking, and constant environment monitoring through cameras and radars. And in the cargo transport sector, new automated dumping systems mean the driver no longer needs to leave the cab. Just push a button, and a set of hydraulic cylinders performs the operation with millimeter precision. There are even autonomous trucks in testing that eliminate human error entirely in loading and unloading tasks. The contrast with the raw mechanical brutality of the Raba D50 couldn't be more extreme. When it comes to other dangerous trucks in history, there's no shortage of models that raised concerns due to their design. The Ford C-Series from the 1960s and 70s, for example, had a forward cab with no crash absorption zone, which meant any frontal collision could be lethal for the driver. In the Soviet Union, certain KamAZ 500 models were notorious for becoming unstable with poorly distributed loads and for brake systems that failed easily in cold climates. Another emblematic case is the Kenworth K100, an American cab-over model popular in the 70s and 80s. Although powerful and maneuverable, its high cab position and limited frontal visibility made it prone to accidents in urban maneuvers. Drivers nicknamed it the rib breaker because of how much their backs suffered after long hours without modern suspension. These cases, along with the Dutra DR-50D, show us that the history of heavy transport has also been a history of lessons learned. For every dangerous machine, there was a takeaway. And for every mechanical flaw, an innovation emerged that gradually saved more lives. This is how the safety standards we now take for granted were built. If you enjoyed this and you're passionate about the world of trucks, you'll definitely love what's coming. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you don't miss any videos about these giants of the road.